Hey, good morning guys. It is Monday. We're back on site, day 4. We got snow, which means first thing we've got to do is clean everything up. We got to uncover all of our piles. Thankfully, we thought about it on Friday and we went and covered up all of our lumber piles before we left. The most that we could, I mean, with as much as we could. What really stinks here probably the worst part about winter builds is you never quite know. I mean, last week this site was pretty darn perfect. It was firm enough due to the cold that we weren't working in mud. Never last. Now we're gonna be working in snow, and what happens is if we don't clean up like our scissor lift, if we don't clean off the machinery, it just becomes more of a mess. And I don't think we're gonna see any sun today, which means it won't melt. I don't think we're even gonna see above freezing. I mean, it really is quite a pain. You can see we didn't have anything to cover up this pile here. So those are all 2x6s, which is unfortunately, I guess I didn't think very well. That's what we're gonna use first to make our fascia. So the goal today is to try to get the machinery around the site so we can put our tails, which is gonna create our 2-foot overhang, and then put our fascia boards on. That way we can prep to get roof steel on. It's a 16-foot tall building. It's just kind of standing out there, and the structure of a post frame, the real diaphragm strength, does not come into play until the steel is secured on the roof and the walls. See, now we don't have a horrible mess of snow and ice on our lumber, so glad we thought about putting those tarps on. I don't know whose idea it was, probably Greg's, probably not. One really important thing to remember is when you're winter building, you gotta remember where all your piles are. We kind of forgot about this one right here behind me, and Greg was like, oh yeah, we got roof steel over there, so gotta make sure we uncover everything so we know where it's at. That would really stink to drive the skid loader right over a pile of roof steel and probably cost ourselves a couple few thousand dollars. So you can see what happens when we don't cover our material and it snows out. It turns into a bunch of ice and a lot more time on the job site before we can use it. This is what we call our tail. It's what creates our 2-foot overhang. And when we make a 2-foot overhang, we use a 2x4 4-footer. And when we do a 1-foot overhang, we use a 32-inch 2x4. Now, all we're doing is we're driving some 60-penny nails in, 2 of them up on the top over the truss. And some people ask me why we don't just have our truss manufacturer apply these on in the factory. Honestly, because most likely they're going to break off, and that's just due to the nature of coming out on site, the way they get installed. No matter what, I'm going to have to set these to the right dimension, which is 2 foot off. Yeah, I could run a string line and snap them, but to be honest, this is a lot easier, and it allows us to straighten the building later. Otherwise, we would have to straighten it, then cut them off, and it just wouldn't work out. I mean, maybe that doesn't make sense, but it's hard to straighten here, but it's easy to put a string line and straighten the fascia and make sure that looks good. And you can't really do that until you've cut your overhangs to the right dimension if they come factory applied.
I'm a little bit confused.
Okay, I realize that might be confusing. If the tails are installed at the factory, and let's say they make them a little bit long and then we're supposed to just cut them to be correct, we would have to straighten the wall and the trusses before we could snap a line or do whatever so that we could cut them effectively. So to me, this is the easiest way. This way we can make them like we want them. We can measure into our post and set them right at 2 foot. And then once our fascia is on, we'll come back and we'll put a string line or the laser, whatever we can do to verify that everything is straight. That way we know if we straighten the fascia, then our building is straight also. Better?
That is better.
Okay, I gotta give GRK some love. You can see here, this is their new screw design. They changed the top, they changed the shaft. The shaft here is longer, so it doesn't grab and pull your material apart as you're going into your, let's say, two 2x4s. But what's the best thing is, look at that. I can put the screw on the bit, which this is a newly designed bit as well. And I can do this with one hand. Push it,
Roll it.
yeah, roll it. Roll it.
Be a team on this one.
You gotta, yeah. To go a little lower or a little higher because it's gonna go in. Yep.
Yep. Huh, it's like we know what we're doing.
Been doing it a couple years. So when doing grade board on a foundation wall, it's a little bit different because, well, it don't have to be different, but we like to add a little bit of an extra level of protection for wind or air infiltration, because we're not having backfill or something to be sealed up against that grade board like a typical building where finished floor is 4 inches up on the grade board. Here, the whole point of the foundation wall is to keep everything up out of the dirt, out of the gravel, out of the weather, and hopefully to last forever. So having that concrete sticking up means that there can be a connection between our grade board and the concrete where there's not a good seal. So we use a roll of this Asp Sealant Tape. Nothing extremely special about it. It's used typically on hips, ridge, valleys. What's nice about it is it expands to fill the gaps. So even if there's some imperfection between the straightness of the wall, or maybe there's a little bit of a chunk knocked out of our grade board, I don't know, whatever that could be, you roll this through the grade board, and when you put it down, it expands and closes the gap, creating your seal. So there's a good example of the foam. You can see where it's expanded already here. This is the end of a roll where it's really tight, so it's not expanded nearly as much, but it'll all just fill up. I think about an inch gap is what it can fill up and keep sealed. Pretty good product. We'll flip this over to the wall like this guy, create a nice seal. So one of the nice things about when you run your purlin on top of the truss like this is it gives you your overhang. So you can just run the purlin long. Here we run it 2 foot long, actually 1 foot 10.5 inches. By the time we add our 2x subfascia, that'll give us our 2 foot overhang.
Need to get a heated floor on the flip.
That'd be nice.
That'd be really good.
Up.
Up.
A little more. Right there. Up. Up. Okay. Down into the hair. Right there. That couldn't have been any closer.
Bro, I had that planned out perfectly. I knew what I was doing.
we're just gonna, you good?
Yeah.
Okay.
What are you doing?
Huh?
Oh, I see what you're doing.
Okay. Down low. Well, it's definitely been a cold morning. I thought when we got here it was going to be a fairly decent day because it just felt kind of nice and warm, but the breeze has picked up, has not had any sun. We're getting the overhangs done, we're getting the grade board done, and hopefully we can prep. I don't know if we'll be able to do any roofing because there's ice and snow up on the purlin, so unless we get some UV rays burning through the clouds and it can start melting that off those tops of the purlins, I don't know if we're going to be able to roof unless we go and hand scrape them, which we're not doing that. So what I'm doing here is I'm cutting up all of our wall bracing, and we used to do just a slanted board from the bottom to the top, and if you've seen post frame before, you've probably seen that angle bracing. It's actually not very effective, anything over 45 degrees. So if your board is pitched any more than 45 in your angle brace, you start losing effectiveness and strength on that shear detail. So what we started doing was a double X. We stole that from an engineered building project that we had done for somebody using somebody else's package. So I stole it because I liked it, and I think it gives us a lot better shear strength to our wall, especially until we get that steel skinned diaphragm on. So what I'm doing is basically I've done all the calculations in the warmth of the trailer, and I was able to get the dimensions needed. And I always like to use this little, I mean, this is a cheap Stanley square. It's got the protractor little arm that kind of swings around, and you can change the degree to whatever you want, and it just makes it very easy to do repeatable, repetitious marks for your cuts. Somebody already got it out.
Dead battery?
Dead battery. Hopefully now you can see this makes sense. That's our wall bracing. That's our X bracing is what we call it. And instead of just doing like from right here, if I'm looking at my camera here, all the way up to the top, a lot of people will just run one board from top to bottom. Anything over 45 degrees is not nearly as strong as something at 45 degrees or less to resist that lateral strength being pushed against it, let's say in wind loading or whatever. So we always try to keep this under 45 degrees. These ones are 44.5 2, I do believe. So these are going to be super strong. We're going to have a double X, which means we'll have an X on the bottom. And then we'll go ahead and we'll put another X right above it, and that helps stiffen this wall up real nice so we can feel good about putting the roof on and doing all the next level stuff like putting windows in, knowing that it's not going to go anywhere and get out of level on us.
You're on the downhill right now. Actually, you're like at the coasting level. You're coasting right now.
Greg, I am at the
downhill.
I'm at the eclipse. I'm at my prime. I will never be better in my life. You think I'll get better?
Yeah, dude, that's exactly what I'm saying.
Or are you thinking I'm past it?
I think you might be a little bit past.
Oh my
30
God.
Kyle would be killing the game right now.
Greg, I can't even believe it. Are we friends or are we not friends?
We are, that's why I'm telling you the truth.
At my prime, Greg.
Okay, Kyle.
Prime, Greg.
You might be wiser than 30-year-old Kyle, but I don't know. 30-year-old Kyle was. He was the real deal, man.
I mean, are you gonna make a memorial for 30-year-old Kyle or what,
I
bro?
might actually. I think I might make this like nice, like altar looking thing.
I would be very ripped. I feel like there was a time when I had the
Bro,
leanest.
Your veins will have veins. That's
That in the mural, my veins will have veins. Those days are coming back. You just wait.
We'll see. You could probably get that way if you just ate healthier. Taco Bell ain't gonna do that for you, you know?
I don't even know what you're talking about. You've been pretty sick.
Yeah, I have lost some weight.
Whatever you want to call it. So now that we've got these X braces done here, I feel really good about these walls not moving on us. The chains are going to help aid that until the steel is done. And you might be asking, is there any reason why you put them where you put them? And to be honest, some of them, especially this one behind me, is there because normally I would come off the corner and put them right in the corners, but we've got windows back there. So I thought I'm just going to skip a bay. And then over here, honestly, I just matched it. So I was able to be efficient because all 3 of those bays were the same width, which meant my angles were the exact same. So I was really just being efficient as possible, and there really was no rhyme or reason as to where I put them other than the one that had the window in the bay right next to it. Also, little side note, today, not the most productive. We've done some window framing, we've done some grade board, we've done some fascia boards, some overhangs, and some X bracing on our walls. We're gonna go ahead and try to straighten out and square the building as best as possible so that hopefully tomorrow morning the snow and ice that's up on those purlins is gone enough to a point where we can start roofing, because that's what we want to do, but it's just not the smartest move to rush into the roofing side of it until some of that ice and stuff is gone. And obviously we can't put steel over top of the ice, because when the ice melts, the screw's not going to be down all the way, and then you just got all sorts of problems. So we're going to go ahead and spend some time the rest of the day probably cleaning, doing some other blocking, miscellaneous, you know, just all that nitty-gritty boring stuff that doesn't actually look good because you never notice it, but hopefully it'll help aid in the efficiency later on.
Not too much.
I don't want to get a copyright claim, Greg, if you're singing a song that's copyrighted.
Not bad. Yeah, I know. Good.
So when when we're ready to straighten out our building, the string is the easiest way to go because it never lies. If you tighten it between 2 points, it will be straight. Now, when it gets windy, the string line is not very effective because you might get a little bit of a bow. And if you're using a short building or you're laying out a short building, it can be okay. But once you get to a point where the string is getting a bow in it, you got to either use a laser or wait till it's not windy. Luckily for us, we don't have any breeze blowing the string line, so we're gonna go ahead and try to straighten out this building with the string. You've probably seen us do it a couple times, but we're just gonna go truss by truss and tail by tail and push and pull it so that it's lined up with the string, and that will give us a straight building from one end to the other just at the trusses. The fascia could have a bow in and out, and we take care of that when we're roofing. So what we like to do is after we have our string line established, we just take our square and we basically just kind of plumb it up and see where the string is in correlation with the back side of the fascia. That way we know, as long as we're just kissing our square on every one, and you can tell we've got a chain down there, way down there, well, about in the middle of the building where it's really far in, and we probably, you know, we never actually leveled or plumbed up our chain when we brace the building. We just put it on, and now it needs to be adjusted appropriately. You can see the chain over that way going down there to that center post. So we got to make some adjustments, no big deal. This tail, when I put my square, watch this, see how I'm past it? That means I need to move, now I need to move this truss that way. That way it's more lined up with the string here. So this one here, we got to wedge just a little bit.
Just a hair more, Zach.
Yeah.
Perfect.
So we're achieving that. Zach's down there and he's basically just putting a little wedge to tighten the tension on our chain just enough. And you can already see the improvement in our fascia. It's already looking a ton better. Just by basically moving 1 or 2 chains, because we've spent the time at the beginning of the job when we were standing our walls to use that 12-foot Stabila plate level to set the walls in the brackets with all the lags and the through bolts plumb in the first part. So that way when we got to this point, there shouldn't be a ton of movement because it should be in a straight line. If we start straight, we end straight. .32 8 5/8 is my diagonal. Okay, what were we, Greg?
38 3 5/8. I believe.
38 3 5/8. How about 33 8 5/8? Does that make?
8 5/8. Yeah, that's fine. It makes more sense.
We're still way off. You're heavy.
Maybe, yeah.
Yeah, we know it needs to go back. Let me double check our measurement. 33 8 5/8. I'm going for right there, and I want to be 33 8 5/8. I'm about ½ inch, Zach. We need to loosen the chain going this way. We need to go that way, bud. You got it? You burning a foot? Okay. That was too much, Zach. We went about ½ inch the other way. So one way or the other, we need to wedge it. Take that link off, and now let's wedge it, dude. You only got to come, let's say 1/8 inch or better. A little more. Oh, hold that right there. I would say that's pretty good. 33 8 5/8. I think we like it. So because the dimension was long when we measured our peak dimension based off of, you know, using the calculator to figure out the diagonal dimension based off of the rise and run, that's the easiest way to get square on your roof framing. Because my diagonal was bigger than what I wanted it to be, we went ahead and we pulled the chains. We loosened the one side, tightened the other, and that's what brought that peak back the way we want it to go, which reduced the dimension on our diagonal, bringing us to the perfect square. Once we've gotten our fascia on the eave perfectly straight with that string line, made sure that all of our walls were plumb. The last thing to really do is to get that peak where you want it so that you're square. That way when you start roofing your metal sheets, you can lay it all out and everything runs in a nice straight line. It doesn't have that nasty jag at the bottom of your roof panels where you got, you know, from one sheet to the next, you kind of got this like wave going. So if anybody's ever installed metal or sheeting or anything, you know exactly what I'm talking about. So now that we've got our peak squared up to our eave and everything is good there, that doesn't mean that our end fascia is straight. So then we just kind of eyeball it. If it's a really big building, sometimes we'll put a string on it or we'll use a laser. In this instance, it's not that far off. I think right about where our gusset plate is on our truss, we just need to give it a little bit of pull. So we're gonna hook a chain up on the top cord of our truss. We'll pull it the other way that we need it to go and we should be good. We'll see how we do. So we're gonna go ahead and pull our chain. Let's see what happens. Give another link there, Zach. That's too much. Take it off. We're going to have to wedge it. Okay, wedge it. We need a little bit more, Zach. Yeah, that's pretty good there. I like that. Now we just got to fix this bottom. And once we fix the bottom, we should be pretty good. All right, it's about the end of the day here. I'm going to start putting stuff away. We got the building straightened out. So tomorrow, they're calling tonight for some drizzling rain, ice, which could be really bad for us because we basically didn't roof today because of the ice up on the purlins. It's almost gone, and if it comes in tonight in a storm or something, it's just gonna put us back even that much further. Regardless, I hope you guys are enjoying the video series so far. I'm trying to kind of highlight and show a little bit of the different stuff. I know I've probably shown a lot of these techniques, but I'm trying to kind of show them in either more depth or maybe a little different way. So, you know, I hope you guys are enjoying it. And if you are, please hit that subscribe button, show me some love, drop a comment down below, letting me know what you think. And, you know, more importantly, I think, is if you share the video, maybe we can reach more people, show them how awesome post frame can be, how much fun you can have in the trades, and how gratifying it is just to be out here building something, even though it's cold, even though we got setbacks with the weather. I'd still rather be here than an office any day. Not knocking offices, just not for me. So you guys have a great day. I'm gonna get cleaned up, head home to the wife and kids. We'll catch you guys back here tomorrow. Later.